that obviously you are here for using technology to support students who struggle with emotion and behaviors. This is a topic that is really close to my heart, and I am super excited to be talking about it today. One of the things I want to make you aware of is that I will have the chat and the Q&A up. I do have a secondary screen right below where I'm at. So if you see me looking down, that is what I'm looking at. I'm not ignoring you at that point. But I wanted to let you know that before it's just suddenly gone. We are going to go ahead and jump into a slideshow here for a bit. As we go on through the presentation a little bit later, we will go ahead and pull out of the presentation and actually demo some websites and things as we get going. So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Cassie Frost. I am an assistive technology specialist, behavior specialist, and then I always like to add problem solver, collector of things that may come in handy, which is this wonderful closet behind me, and a believer that everyone can learn. I spent about my first 15 years in education, teaching students who struggled with emotions and behaviors, starting off in a residential treatment facility, moving into alternative education placements, and then in the public school system. So I have quite a background in the behavior before I moved into assistive technology. This is actually something that kind of came accidentally to me. I went to a couple of technology conferences and really started realizing that a lot of the stuff that they were sharing really would make a huge difference for my students. And as we're talking through things today, I have a couple of stories that I will tell about that as well. So I'm very excited to be able to talk not just about assistive technology, but also about engaging technology, classroom technology, and some things that really are going to help out our students who are struggling. If you have any questions as we go through, feel free to put them in the chat. I will be monitoring that. You don't have to feel like you need to hold on to them till the end. So 3 objectives for today. I want to make sure that you can identify at least 3 benefits of low-tech and high-tech supports, 3 methods for increasing expected behaviors while using technology, because we all know technology can sometimes add to the behaviors, and identify at least 3 technologies that can help students with elevated emotions. So we're going to talk first about defining behavior, just so that we're all on the same page. We all are understanding, kind of knowing where I'm coming from with this. We're going to talk about behavior and independence. We're going to define emotions, talk about emotional regulation in school, and then spend probably the last half to third actually looking at some tools. So that's where we're going to jump out of this presentation and demonstrate some websites, apps, extensions that can really help with independence, engagement, and emotional regulation. So here are the 2 behavior principles that I'm going to be focusing on as we're presenting today. These are the core beliefs that I have about students, and I feel like we need to have these ingrained in us if we're going to be successful with our kids. The very first one is that every child wakes up wanting to be successful. While we may have difficult days, we may have students that struggle, we may end up with students displaying some really unexpected behaviors. I don't believe that there's any child that wakes up in the morning wanting people to be upset with them, wanting to fail, wanting to not do well. So we're going to come at this from the standpoint of every child wakes up wanting to be successful. The second one is that all people, kids and adults, exhibit behavior to get what they want or need. This is simply what behavior is. We do what we do in order to get what it is that we want or we need. So what we do to get what we need. We smile at people. So if we have people that we like and we want attention from them, we may smile at them. That tells them that we like them, that we want attention from them. That is a behavior. We may wave at people if we want to signal, hi, how are you? I like you. Alternatively, we may do the opposite. If we don't want to talk to someone, we may walk on the far side of the hall. We may take a different route. We may avert our eyes. Right? We may avoid. We also do things like go to work, right? That's a behavior. We get up and go to work because there's something we get out of it. We call a friend if we want to talk to somebody. Our students do the same things, right? But oftentimes they might not have the skills yet to do them in a socially appropriate way. So for our students who are struggling with emotions and behaviors, it's really easy to get wrapped up in the behavior at the moment. But it's really important to sit down and understand that they're trying to get what they need. So whether that's attention, whether that's to escape something that's uncomfortable, whether it's to save themselves from embarrassment, whether it's to be more independent, our students are doing something that gets them something they need. So when we're looking at tools today, that's really what we're going to focus in on. So when we're talking about students with emotions and behavior and students who struggle with those things, one of the biggest things we talk about is independence. So the definition of independence is free from outside control or support, the state of being independent. The synonyms for this I love. Get out a thesaurus, this is awesome. Self-sufficient, self-dependent, self-reliant. If you notice, all these have the word self. These are all things students can do on their own. Students like being independent. So do we as adults, and so do our little ones. Think about if you have a child or a niece or a nephew or a grandchild or a neighbor kid who's around, 2 years old. What do we say? The terrible twos, right? Because they want to do it themselves. I do it. I'll do it. I'll do it. Even if they can't do it, they still want to do it on their own. They'll wear their jacket upside down for hours over letting you help them put it on the right way, right? This is a core thing as people, right? That we want to be independent. Unfortunately, a lot of our students may struggle with independence, especially in a school setting. If we have students who struggle with reading, with writing, right? With sitting still, with following the expectations in class, they aren't going to be able to be as independent. This is when they need an aide to maybe prompt them, or a peer to help them out, or a teacher to step in. That can be difficult for our elementary kids because it's taking away that independence. But as students get older, especially into those junior high years, this can be a much more difficult thing to handle. These students in junior high years would do anything to be independent, right? They want to grow up. They want to do it themselves. So when somebody else comes in and tries to, help them out, they view that as taking away their independence. Oftentimes, then we end up with unexpected behaviors. This may be where the student is going to yell at someone, try to escape the environment because it feels uncomfortable to have someone help. This is where technology can really come in. So technology can decrease unexpected behavior. Now, this may be kind of something that's a little more controversial because a lot of times we think about technology and computers and iPads and we think, sometimes this can cause behavior problems because our kids are distracted. They're doing things they're not supposed to. But if we do it the right way, the technology can actually help with these things. So think about a student who maybe struggles with reading. If they struggle with reading, oftentimes they're going to have an adult help them. That's a loss of independence. Instead of being, embarrassed by that or losing their independence, some students may choose to act out. This is to save face, right? So that their peers don't think less of them, or they may choose to shut down. Technology can really step in here and help. It can increase independence. They can practice skills that they need throughout their life, and it gives them the power to do things on their own. So this was one of my really big moments. When I went to this technology conference years and years and years ago, one of the things that was shown to me that day was how to use a QR code to create a link to something that you can scan on an iPad and watch a video. So I'm thinking as I'm watching this, that back in my classroom, I have a student. He is wonderful. He is kind. He is caring. He's the first student that's going to ask you if you've been gone, how are you? Right? You guys know those kids, right? If you're out sick, the next day that student is the first one to say, are you okay? How are you feeling? Wonderful student. However, he was going out into class and at least 5 or 6 times a day, he was getting kicked out of class. And I was hearing things that he was yelling at the educational assistant. He was swearing. He was doing all of these things to get kicked out of class, and it just didn't seem to match. And what we started realizing was he was really struggling with reading in class, but he wouldn't accept help from the educational assistant. As we started looking at this a little bit further, we realized that he was a 12 or 13-year-old teenage boy, and he had a female older educational assistant who was wonderful, and they got along so well. But in class, when it was time to read, she would need to go and sit next to him to read to him. He viewed that as embarrassing. Now, whether that was because he had something happen at home or he internalized that, or whether that was because a peer said something one time, right? Whatever it was, anytime that happened, he would act out. He would try to save face. He'd try to do something to get kicked out of the classroom. Now, this wasn't an intentional thing. I don't think he planned it out to do that. But when you feel uncomfortable, you're going to do what you need to do to get what you need, right? So when I found out about this whole QR code thing and scanning it to watch videos, I actually came back to my classroom. I talked to my special ed director. I got myself an iPad in my classroom, and we started recording his worksheets. So every time he got a worksheet, we would record the audio to it, and we'd flip it to a QR code. We'd put it on the corner of the worksheet. And we're going to talk more about QR codes in a little bit. But what we saw was a complete change in this student. Now, when it was time to read, he simply would scan the QR code and he could listen to the assignment. He didn't look different. He wore headphones and he had an iPad. So the rest of the kids thought he was kind of cool, and he could be independent. Those are the types of things that our technology can do for us. So this isn't only for students who struggle with an academic task. It could be a social thing. It could be engagement. It could be ADHD. But technology can bring in a whole new realm of things to help our students who are struggling. So goal number 1 for today, we're going to talk about using technology that promotes independence. Okay, so we're going to keep these. We've got 3 goals we're going to keep in mind today. So let's talk about emotions. Why are emotions important? Well, when our emotions are not right, we tend to escalate or shut down. Right? When we're feeling scared, when we're feeling uncomfortable, right? When we're feeling nervous, we tend to either escalate, right? We get anxious, we get fidgety, or we may just shut down. Oftentimes, unfortunately, school can bring these emotions out that you haven't seen since the weekend, and you guys had a fight this week. Trying to make friends, we're trying to learn, we're trying to please our teacher, we're trying to please our parents. The school is full of emotions. And if our emotions aren't well regulated, we're going to be dealing with escalation and shutdown. A lot of times those are coming in the forms of avoidance, right? To avoid what's going on, or fear of what's going on. So goal number 2 today is to use technology to de-escalate students and help them regulate emotions. So we're going to look for some tools today that are going to work for students who are already escalated. How can we help bring them down using technology? And also, how can you use technology to help them regulate emotions on a regular basis? Now is where we're going to talk about those pitfalls. So again, if you're one of the people, when I first said technology can be great for independence, it can decrease behavior, and you went, I don't know about that. This is where we're going to talk about that part. So technology can have pitfalls. I'm not saying it can't. Technology can be an escape, right? Some students will pull into technology, websites, games, music, things like that to escape what's going on around them. If you add technology without a solid plan, right, this can cause a significant increase in unexpected behaviors and emotional dysregulation. So think about this, especially in the last couple of years, when all of a sudden we put so much more technology into a lot of classrooms than you probably had in your classrooms before. And there really wasn't necessarily a lot of time to make a plan. That's when things can get a little bit chaotic. So think about the plans that you have for everything else in your classroom. You have plans of how to line up, of how to hand in papers, of where students sit. You have plans for those things. We need to do the same thing with technology. The very first thing that I talk about when I talk about technology and routines and patterns and plans is exactly that, routines. Making sure that you have routines in your classroom for technology. If we're looking at decreasing behavior, okay, decreasing unexpected behavior, regulating emotions, and now we have technology in our classroom, right? The first thing that I'm going to do when I walk into a classroom to talk with a team about a student who's displaying behavior and who has technology in their world are, what routines do you have in place? And I'm going to challenge you, if you don't already have these, I'm going to say that this is the first thing you do when you leave this webinar today or tomorrow morning, is sit and give yourself about 10 minutes and think this through. I'm going to show you a whole bunch of really cool tools. And by all means, they are the most exciting things to think of. These tools are amazing. They're exciting. They're new. They're the things we kind of gravitate to using. But if you start using them without a routine for using them, we're going to end up with more behavior instead of less. Because routines and patterns are comforting. We like them. We like to know what to expect. We, just like our students, like knowing what happens when we do A, that we always end up with B, right? It makes us feel good. We know what's going to happen. So think about in your classroom. You likely have a routine for lining up. If you don't, you're likely a secondary teacher, because we all know our kindergarten, first grade teachers are like amazing at this routine, right? There's a system for it. There's a routine. When do you do it? How does your teacher tell you that you're going to do it? Where do you go to do it? What are the behavioral expectations while you do it, right? There's a routine for that. Going through a lunch line, there is a routine. Where do you pay? Can you stand by your friends? Can you talk? Raising your hand, right? Some teachers are all about raising your hand to answer questions. Some of them only make you raise your hand certain times. Handing in papers. Some teachers have the basket in the front of the room and everything goes there. Some teachers have the students pass things up to them in the front. None of these routines are wrong, but they are a routine. Imagine your classroom if you didn't have those routines. You'd have students running up to the front of the room to line up. Papers would be everywhere. It would be complete chaos. Do you have the similar plan for technology? So for example, I'm thinking about a junior high classroom. Students carry their Chromebooks with them. Okay, this is our environment. We've got a classroom. Our students are carrying Chromebooks in with them. When they walk into your classroom, if this was your room, what do students do with that Chromebook? Without a routine or a plan, some students may come in and immediately pull out the Chromebook and go to the classroom assignment. Some other students may come in and immediately log onto the computer and go to Minecraft. Some other students may keep those Chromebooks in their bag and shove them under their desk. Now you've got students doing a wide variety of things. This isn't necessarily in and of itself awful until you want to start teaching. And now you may need to ask 2/3 of your class to close their technology and put it away. If it's a student who's engaged in what they're doing, you're going to hear a lot of just one more minute. I just need to finish this, but I was doing this. And now we're triggering all of those behaviors and emotions. So having a routine in place from the beginning makes this a lot easier. Think of that same classroom where the routine is always when you walk into the classroom, the Chromebook stays in the bag and it goes under your desk. Chromebooks come out when the teacher says, okay, everybody get out your Chromebooks. You teach students that as soon as they open their Chromebook in your classroom, they automatically go to your school website. That's where they go. You have a routine that you always give them a 5-minute warning before they need to wrap up and close their Chromebook, right? These are routines. These are patterns. So I want you to think about the patterns and routines that you have in your classroom around technology. And before you try any of the other things we're going to talk about today, I want you to make sure that you have some routines in place. Now, keep in mind, if you're not using them already, we know these are going to take some time to get in place. So please don't think of, wow, I'm not doing this. Tomorrow I'm going to start a routine and then get upset in a day or two when it doesn't work, right? We're talking about students who are used to things. They've already got their own routines in place. They just might not be yours. So make sure that this is something you're going to give some time to and be consistent with. Once we have those routines in place, once we know that we need routines for technology use, we can start thinking about some other things we can use. So goal number 3, remember we have 3 of them today, is to integrate technology in ways that it does not cause disruption. So we want to have technology that can increase independence and decrease behaviors. We have goal number 2, that we want to use technology to de-escalate students and regulate emotions. And we have goal number 3, which is to integrate that technology in a way that it doesn't cause disruptions in your classroom. So let's step out and look a little bit more at your classroom. So we talked about routines. Those are the systems that you have in place. Let's talk a little bit now about the actual environment in your room. In order to be successful with technology in your classroom, you need to make sure that you have these things in place. You need to make sure that you have clear spaces for tasks. Where do students do specific things? If you have a classroom where they stay at their desk all day, you're pretty much good to go, right? Or all class period. But if you have a classroom like a science classroom where students move maybe to lab tables, or you have a classroom where students come up to work with you at the front table for a reading group, having defined places, where do students go to do different tasks? This can come in play with computers and technology a lot. So maybe you have a corner of the room where students are using iPads to record Flipgrid videos. If you're doing Flipgrid videos in your class, where is the space in the classroom where they go to do that recording? Can they just take the iPads to their desk? Can they do it in the front of the room? We all know that can cause a lot of distraction. So having a clear space where that's used. If students are using speech to text, right? They're talking. Where do they do that? Do they do that at their desk? Is there a quieter space they go? Think about the spaces in your classroom and where they can do each different type of task. Visuals are great, especially as you're teaching your routines. Have visuals up. Have a visual up that reminds students to put the Chromebooks under their desk when they come in. Have a visual up that tells students, reminds students of what the cue is to put the iPad away. Have some visuals out for students. Make sure as you're designing your classroom that you have a line of sight to screens. We all know that students can be off task on technology. We also know that adults can be off task on technology. So I'm not calling out students here. We all do it. But that off task behavior will decrease significantly if you can see the students' screens. Now, there are all sorts of monitoring softwares out there, but students don't necessarily feel that you're watching them with those as much as if you're up and moving around the room. So think about where your students are sitting when they're using technology, and think about where you are in the classroom and how you can move around to see those screens. That doesn't mean that you're going to be able to see them all of the time, but think about how your students can sit so that maybe as you're walking around the room and teaching, you can see the majority of screens the majority of the time. Have some consequences in place, both positive and negative. Remember, consequences are just what happens based off of something else. So consequences sometimes get a negative feel, but positive and negative. If students are using technology appropriately, is there a positive consequence? Do you give them a high five? Do you say, way to go? Do students earn free time on technology? Do they get opportunities to do unique things on technology if they're using it appropriately? If they're not using it appropriately, what happens? Do they lose some free time on the computer? Does the computer not get to be used for certain activities? Having those consequences in mind in advance and having them set and consistent will go a long way. Students need to know, remember, they need to know what's going to happen every time. So if every time they take out their computer when they're supposed to, they get a smile from you and a high five, that's awesome. It's going to encourage it more. If they end up losing 2 minutes of free time on the computer or something every time they have it out at the start of class instead of under their desk, they're not likely to do it, but it has to happen every time. And that's where that consistency goes in place. Once you have routines in place, once you have specific places and spaces for certain tasks, once you have routines for where they go, you need to be consistent with those. So sometimes this really will help if you're developing this plan for the first time, or maybe you have a new group of students, or you have students coming back from virtual learning. Take a little bit, and that's that 10-minute time that I suggested earlier, and even just write down what your plan is. It doesn't have to be pretty, no one's going to see it, but write down, when do students use computers? When do they put them away? How do you tell students they're going to use them? Sometimes just writing it out really can help solidify it in our own brains. And we're going to sneak in an extra goal here just because, we got to have a fun one. Use technology to create engaging classrooms and lessons. So in addition to using technology so that it doesn't disrupt the class, let's look at some things to make our classrooms more fun, more engaging. And this is one of the things that technology can be great for, because we know the more students are engaged, the more interested they are, the more excited they are, the more they're going to be paying attention, the less unexpected behavior we're going to see. So let's go ahead and get started. I am just curious if you would be willing to throw in the chat, how many of you have used Padlet? If you have used Padlet, go ahead and just throw like a yes or a thumbs up or something in the chat. I'm just curious. I'm seeing mostly yeses, a few no's in here. Awesome, keep it coming. A couple of people said yep with some exclamation points, so you know that it's pretty cool. Okay, and some bunches of no's. Okay, so we're going to spend some time with Padlet because even those of you that have used it already may not necessarily use it always in the same ways as everybody else. So we're going to talk a little bit about what you can do with Padlet. So Padlet is a website that allows you to have sort of a virtual corkboard. So we have some other websites that are like virtual whiteboards where you can write. If you haven't put it in chat yet, feel free. I'm still kind of monitoring that. But instead of a virtual whiteboard where you're writing, this time it's a corkboard. It's a place you can put things. So I'm going to jump out to Padlet. This is the way that Padlet looks when you first log in. And they change this from time to time. So don't be shocked if you come on and the background's a little bit different color or something. So by default, you get, I believe it's 3 Padlets for free. The good news is you can delete those and go back to them and recreate those 3. So that's kind of nice. You can do a lot with it. If you want more than that, you do need to pay for them. So one of the great things about Padlet is we can simply make a Padlet and we can pick out different kinds of layouts. So we can have it stacked in columns, we can do grids, we can do walls. We're going to go ahead and just kind of pick a wall. This is the one that I like. And then Padlet allows you to do some really cool things. So you can title it, which is going to change up here. You can make a description. So if you wanted students to do something here, you can change the icon, you can change the name. So maybe it's C for Us demo board. Okay, I gotta not put a space there. So you can change your website. You can change the background. Okay, so this is super exciting, right? You can go and do all those customization things. And then you can change your color scheme. But what's really cool down here, especially for those of us who work with students with emotional and behavioral dysregulation, you can also decide if you want to display the author name or not. Where do you want new posts to appear? Can viewers comment on each other's posts? Can they give reactions like stars, thumbs up? But more importantly, you can also require approval, meaning before a post would go on here by your students, it comes to you first, and you have to approve it before everybody can see it. Okay, I'll talk more about that in just a second. And then also you can filter profanity. So if a student tries writing a swear word on it, it's just going to give them a happy emoji instead. Okay. So once that's done, you're going to click next. And now all of a sudden you have your Padlet. The thing that I like about Padlet is the way to edit it is simply to click on this, double click on the screen, and you can start writing. It's that quick. So that quickly, I was able to create something that lives on my Padlet. If I wanted to edit that, I can click on it again, or I can double click and start another post. So this way, Padlet gets used a lot for like brainstorming activities, things where your students can add to a board and discuss things. I think this is a wonderful use of Padlet, right? One thing I will caution you is to make sure that you're using that filtering part. I will tell you, I was teaching a social skills class years ago, and we were using Padlet to brainstorm, and kids were posting ideas at their own computers, and they were coming up on the board, and we were having these really great discussions. And for just a second, I thought, you know what if one of my kids posted something not appropriate? It's going to go up on the board. And I went in and I turned on that filter, and somebody must have been whispering in my ear or something, because about 2 seconds later on my screen, up popped a picture of one of my students flipping off the camera. Now, because I had turned that on, it didn't show up on the big board. It showed up only on my screen. So I could filter that out and not allow it, right? If I hadn't had that filter on place, that would have been up on my screen in front of the room for everybody. Now, I did have a follow-up conversation with the 2 gentlemen, and we had a really great conversation about which one of them should get in trouble the one that took the picture and posted it, or the one that flipped off the camera. But regardless, make sure you're using that filter. But when we're talking about behavior, in addition to having students feel like they can share their ideas, they can share their thoughts, they can brainstorm together, I want to suggest using Padlet for something a little different. So I'm going to go back to my Padlets here, and I'm going to click on my science Padlet. Now, if you look at this, you're going to see a whole bunch of links. It's a lot of words, right? I didn't necessarily set this one up to be super pretty. But what you're seeing right here is the live Padlet that I used in my science classroom. So the way this was set up, so for example, we're going to use motion as our example. So if you look at motion, you're going to see a link to a whole bunch of different things. Some of them are going to be videos, and they're going to have the timestamp with the link. Some of them are going to be games. Some of them, if you come down here, are going to have the asterisks. So the way I set up my Padlet is each topic that we talked about in science had its own little section. And I filled up those sections with information and activities. If I put an asterisk by it, students knew this was a video or an activity that we use in the classroom. This means if I have a student that's gone because they're in the office, because they were kicked out of class, because they're homesick, they can easily come to my Padlet and click on the video or the activity that has the asterisk by it and access what we did in the classroom. This also works well for students who maybe need to see a video or an activity multiple times, and they need to see it again during study hall or at home that night. But you can do this on, all of the LMSs, right? You can provide links to things. What's different about Padlet is I can easily double click and add more. So this means at a quick double click, I can go in, and if a student shows me something really exciting, I can add it that quickly. So the way I use this is I would link my Padlet to my district website and into my LMS, but I still kept my Padlet. Now, other ways this can be used. In addition to students accessing material after your class, there's also another benefit to this for teachers and staff who are working with students who struggle with emotions and behaviors. One of the things that happens anytime that you're working with students who struggle with emotions and behaviors is a disruption, right? You are maybe talking about motion with your class, and all of a sudden you've got a student who's dysregulated. Maybe they're yelling. Maybe somebody showed up at your door and really needs your attention in that exact moment. You need time to be able to process with that student. What happens to the rest of your classroom? The rest of your classroom either sits there and gets lost down an internet, hole if they have computers nearby. Or you may say something like, okay, everybody get out a book and read. Nothing's wrong with reading. But if you're talking about motion and you're talking about forces, and now you've told students, okay, everybody get out your book and read, their focus now has went from science and forces to whatever their book is about. And then when you come back, you have to try to get them to stop reading that book, put the book away, and come back to you. We all know for students who struggle with behavior, sometimes that's really difficult because that's a lot of transitions. There's executive functioning involved. If they're a reader and that book is an escape, it's really hard to get them back. With Padlet, you can do things differently. With Padlet, you can set up all of these activities. And so when I would have a student show up at my door or a crisis in place, I can simply say, okay, guys, we're going to take a little bit of a break here. We've been talking about forces. I've been showing you all of this information, but I want you guys to explore it yourself now. So what I'm going to have you do is go to a computer, log into my science Padlet, and in the motion section, I want you to check out some of the information there. Watch a couple of the videos, play the games, and in 10 minutes, we're going to come back and I want you to share one fact with me that you learned that I have not told you yet. Now students go. They're directed, they know where to go, and they have a plan in place that keeps them engaged in what you were doing in class. Now, I do try to make some fun things in here as well. So you'll see there's some games. If you would be seeing my English Padlet under the outsiders, you might see a quiz saying, which outsider are you? 70s music. The goal of this is to make things that are kind of fun here, not just, the stuff you're showing in the classroom. What's beneficial about this also is you may have a student that finishes early, right? We all have that one student that finishes early and then they're bored and they're getting into trouble in class. Make some fun things on here. When they're finished and say, what can I do? Well, you can hop on the Science Padlet and check out some of the things under habitats, right? And again, the bonus of this is if you have a student who needs somewhere to go or needs help with research or any of those things, I can easily double click and add a link right here that quickly, and it's on my Padlet. So I did have somebody ask if you're able to set it so it can't be edited by the students. Yes, this is one of the great things about Padlet. So when I go here, I can go to share and I can change privacy. So what that means now is I can invite members that can edit it. I can keep it hidden from view from everybody so that they can't find it. I can also set it so that visitors can write on my Padlet or not. So you can go ahead and change a lot of the permissions here. You also can go into settings and come back and change all of these things as well. So often if they're like mine, I will go ahead and make sure that comments are off, attributions off. I will make sure that the sharing settings are only for me, right? So it's only my Padlet. No one else has the ability to edit it. Now, again, if I'm doing brainstorming or something, then I want it to be for everybody. And now what I will do too, this is also just kind of a side thing. This is really fun for KWL charts. So if you have a thing that's like, one Padlet that's K, and at the start of class, have everybody like brain dump everything they know about the topic and then pull up the next one. What do they want to learn about it? And at the end of class, what did they learn? Right. So it's a really fun, easy way to kind of do like an exit ticket and gauge how students are at the front of the classroom. So, and they're all at their own seats in front of their own computer, not poking each other, running around the room. This is always great. So this is one of my favorites. I know we spent a little more time on this one, but this is, again, Padlet is one of my absolute favorite tools for so many reasons for behavior, right? So for students who struggle, this is great. Keep in mind, for students who struggle with emotions, you could also create an emotions Padlet. And you could have maybe anger, and you could have activities that students can do when they're angry. And you could have one that is excited, and you can have activities to do when they're excited, right? So if you're not able to process with a student right in that moment, they can come here and find those activities. Okay, let's move beyond Padlet. I could talk about Padlet for hours, but we're going to move beyond it. Explain Everything is the next we're going to talk about. This is an iOS app. I'm not going to pull it up and show a lot about it because it really does look kind of like your standard whiteboard, right? It's a white screen that you can write on. Now, one of the great things about Explain Everything is that Explain Everything is for education, $14. It's one of the only ones that I've actually paid for. But what it does is allows you to take pictures of things and then write on them. So when I was talking earlier about my student who, was struggling with worksheets, I would simply take a picture of the worksheet, and then I would just pull the worksheet up and I would hit record, and I'd have a little red pointer, and I would just read it with the pointer underneath it. And when I was finished, I'd hit stop, send, and that video is done. The video uploads to my YouTube channel. Now any student can go to that video and they can watch that being read. Now we all know there are a lot of speech to text tools and text to speech tools out there. There's a lot of things that students can use to have worksheets read aloud. But if the teacher doesn't have it scanned in as an accessible PDF, if the student doesn't do well with computer read audio, if you need to maybe give students cues or prompts on the worksheet, think about the student that maybe needs it read aloud and then they need to hear the directions of what they're supposed to do. This is a great way to do it. I've used Explain Everything for many videos. And what's nice is you can zoom into the worksheet, you can zoom out, you can take pictures of the board, you can take pictures of all sorts of things and bring them into your video as part of a whiteboard. So Explain Everything is probably one of my first go-to iOS apps when I'm doing any sort of creation for students. The next one we're going to talk about is Pear Deck. Okay, so just like before, yes or no, is Pear Deck something that you have utilized in your classroom? mostly no's here. Okay, keep them coming. I'm going to start talking. It looks like the majority are no's. So Pear Deck has free and paid options. Typically, I'm utilizing the free stuff. I would love to be using the paid stuff, but I can't have subscriptions to everything. But Pear Deck allows you to have access to a few things in the free version. So let's go ahead and explore. When you first come to Pear Deck, there's a teacher login and there's a join session. If you're a student, you're going to click join session. If you're a teacher, you're going to do teacher login. So because I have the free version, here's what I have access to. So the first one is Pear Deck for Google Slides. This allows you to take a Google Slides presentation and create a lesson with it. So if I go in to create a lesson, I'm going to connect to my Google Drive. And once I've done that, I can go ahead and create one of my Google Slides presentations. And I can actually go ahead and create interactive slides and activities within my slide deck. So this allows me to ask questions. This allows me to create drawing things. And when it's ready, I can just click present lesson. And all of my students that are in with my join code see my lesson on their device. So now they each have the slides in front of them and it guides them right through the slide deck. So this is a really powerful way for students to be able to interact with your presentations and your Google Slides without you having to go in and monitor them all of the time, right? It makes your slides engaging instead of them just set and get from your slides. The other thing that I really love about Google Slides, and this is one of those engaging activities that I really like. So students have to do vocabulary a lot, right? And a lot of our students, especially those who struggle with emotions and behaviors, this can be really difficult, right? Looking up a word, writing the definition can be really hard. Pear Deck has a really fun activity, four-legged drooling animal. So you can go ahead and write your vocabulary term and definition. Cat purrs a lot. Now, obviously, this is not what you would actually do, but for demonstration purposes, it's what I'm going to go with. And I'm going to go with frog. And here I can actually click on definitions, and it will actually give me definitions ready to go. Once I've got my terms in, I can simply click play flashcard. And now this window's up. I see it on the projector. My students are going to go here. They're going to join with this code and they're going to clock in. Now, once they've done that, your students are going to see on their computer if they are a day shift or the night shift. And it's actually going to give them the opportunity to pair up. And one student is going to draw a picture of the word, and one student is going to write the definition. Once they've done that, they're going to agree between the two of them that they're ready to submit it, and their drawing and definition is going to fall onto this little conveyor belt. Okay, so this is a really great way, again, for students to work with each other without working so closely with each other. Again, thinking of students who struggle with emotions and behaviors, sometimes working together can be difficult. So here they're working together without necessarily having to sit together and be right, in each other's space. Once all of these cards are down on the conveyor belt, all of your students have written and drawn the definition, you can then go into quality control. What this is now is actually each one of those cards that your students made will come up on the screen. So as a group, you can talk about the cards and the definition. Think about this if you were teaching emotions, right? And vocabulary and, self-regulation techniques here. Okay, but it works for science and social studies too. I'm just kind of an SEL geek. So then as a class, you can decide, was that a good definition? Does that definition match? Yes or no? And you can stamp it yes, or you can stamp it no. All of the cards that get stamped yes go on. And here's the best part. If you ship these cards, the ones that you've all agreed to, it automatically takes them and puts them into Quizlet. So now you have a study guide and a Quizlet for your students that you didn't have to spend a whole lot of time creating. They did it together. And we all know that students, when they create their own materials, they're much more likely to use them. I'm going to apologize. I have a new puppy and my family just came home. So the puppy's going to probably bark for just a second. I think my mic will filter out most of it. Puppies tend to do that. After Pear Deck, we're going to talk about QR codes. QR codes are one of the most useful tools that I have that don't necessarily get all of the credit that maybe they deserve. It's easy to use extensions and apps and all of those things, but QR codes can be incredibly versatile for students who are struggling, again, with emotions and behaviors. So these little QR codes are, my dogs joined here in Atlanta. Thank you, Dana. I appreciate that I'm not the only one with them. Mine are basset hounds. They're really cute, but they can get a little loud when people get home. So these are QR codes. They can be read up and down, left and right. Most cameras on iPads and things will automatically read QR codes now. QR codes are really easy to make. So some people will get really overwhelmed by QR codes, but you can simply go to something like qrstuff.com. You can put in a website and immediately get your QR code. So this isn't something super difficult to make, okay? So what can you do with a QR code? You can make links for students. So students who struggle typing in long links and then get frustrated because they hit something wrong and it's a huge blow up, you can give them QR codes to get them where they need to go. If you have students that get done early or are always looking for more to do, you can add a link in a QR code, maybe to videos on the topic, maybe to enrichment things, and simply paste that QR code, or, I'm thinking we used to actually have to cut it out and tape it on and photocopy it onto a worksheet. And at that point, then when the student's finished, they can scan the QR code and go to those enrichment things. They're not wandering around the classroom. They're not asking you what to do. They're not disrupting the classroom. What about the students who struggle, but maybe they don't want to ask for help, or they're in study hall and they get really frustrated because they don't remember how to do things? You can easily use a QR code to make a video for review or remediation. A lot of times I'm thinking math class. So a lot of times when I made math worksheets, I would use Explain Everything, and I would write out and complete the first math problem of the worksheet. Then I would put the QR code on the worksheet. So if students were working on that worksheet later outside of my classroom, they could simply scan that code and actually watch me walk through that first problem again. You can make audio recordings, like I said earlier, for students who struggle with reading. Incentives for student motivation. So I had a student that loved cat videos. Cat videos were the greatest thing ever. But if I said, okay, you've got 5 minutes, you can go watch cat videos, by the time you're into YouTube and you're looking around, you're finding things you're not supposed to, it can be quite difficult. But I started making little cards with QR codes that each linked to one cat video. And so when the student was doing really well, I just walked by and set the QR code on their desk. And it was like this exciting puzzle. They didn't know what they were going to get. They could scan the QR code and easily, get to a video or some sort of fun thing. And then also you can create engaging quizzes. So this website is kind of a hidden gem in my opinion. It's called classtools.net. And one of them that it has is a QR code treasure hunt generator. So here you can actually go in right here and you can click on submit, and you can make a series of questions and answers. So this is where you are just going to go in and type in a question and type in an answer, right? So question, asterisk, answer, question, asterisk, answer. So this could be for a science test. This could be vocabulary. I really liked this for vocabulary. So what I would do is I'd put the definition first, and then the word would be the answer. Once it's done, then these questions become QR codes. And so they actually print off on cards, and you can hide these around your classroom. So my students would come in on review day, and I would have 20 QR codes hidden around my classroom, under tables, under desks, behind books. And my students would have to wander around the classroom and find them. When they scan the QR code, it has a number on it. So like number 2, they'd scan it, they would get the definition, and then they would just go back to their desk and find, blank number 2, and they'd write in which vocabulary term it went with. All of a sudden, I had kids that never did study guides for vocabulary that would, complain anytime we had to do a review. all of a sudden I had students coming in like excited that we were going to be reviewing vocabulary that day. And it became a challenge to find all of the QR codes. And better yet, I had students that were helping each other, right? They'd be like, oh, wait, this one's over here. What a great thing for students who struggle with emotions and behaviors and social interactions, for them to have that camaraderie. I just had a person ask, so they would need to have smartphones for the QR activities. They don't have to have a smartphone, but they do need to have an internet device with a camera. So QR readers are on iPads, on smartphones, most Chromebooks that have cameras, right? So a lot of those and computers have webcams and cameras now. If they don't auto read QR codes, there are a bunch of extensions. So we're going to talk about extensions in just a couple minutes, but there are QR code reader extensions. So if you just search that QR code reader for Chromebook, you will come up with a whole bunch of them. So at that point, then they can use their Chromebook or whatever device they use. So as long as it's an internet device, an internet capable device with a camera. So like in high school, a lot of times teachers may have them using their smartphone, but definitely it does not need to be a smartphone. Okay, so again, QR codes, so many things that they can be used for. Let's go with something a little more simple. So QR codes, right? You have to create them. There's a little bit of a thought process involved. This one's just a little more simple and fun. One of the things that students who struggle with emotions and behaviors also seem to struggle with is volume, right? Talking a lot in class, bringing the volume down. You have to cue them and ask them to be a little bit quieter, and then they get upset about that. Bouncy Balls is a fun way to teach students what their volume is. So this website is bouncyballs.org. I'm going to click Begin Bouncing. Now, as you can see, there's all these little balls at the bottom of the screen. When I go ahead and turn on my microphone, every time that I talk, these balls are going to bounce around. The louder that I am, the more they're going to bounce, and the quieter I am, the lower they're going to bounce. I can adjust the sensitivity of these so that they bounce easier. You're going to notice at a certain volume, it's actually going to say too noisy. I can bring this back down. I can also add more balls to the mix if I'd like, or less balls in the mix if I'd like. Keep in mind, if you're doing this with students for the very first time, they really like it, bouncing around a lot. So definitely give them some time to explore with it and practice what's too loud as a classroom. So really to teach that. But, and somebody in chat just said it, Nicole just said it, the eyeballs are the best. So you can change this to emojis. You can change this to bubbles. But one of the coolest ones to keep your class quiet is to use the eyeballs. Now, the reason that the eyeballs are really cool is if you're completely quiet, the eyeballs actually start looking around. So there's kind of that added, kind of weird, but there's also this kind of added like reason to be quiet because you want to see the eyes start looking around. Connie, I did just have someone in chat ask, what QR code generator do you find is easiest to use? There are a whole bunch of them that are built right in with extensions. I still like qrstuff.com just because I can quickly and easily go there and punch in any website, change my color and stuff very easily, add images to it, PDFs to it. So this is still kind of my go-to. I do know there's a lot of extensions, but I remember QR stuff really well. So that tends to be where I go. And then the last kind of website we're going to talk about is Classroom Screen. So now Classroom Screen is a board that you can put in the front of your room. It is free unless you want to save your boards. Then you have to pay for it. I've never felt the need to pay for it. But you go to classroomscreen.com, it comes up on your screen. As a teacher who's working with students who struggle with emotions and behaviors, this allows a whole bunch of resources super easily. So if you need all of your students to get to the same place at the same time, you can easily punch in the website here. It's going to make the QR code and students in the back of the room can come up and scan it. I also can go ahead and make work symbols up to tell my students how loud they should be or what the expectations are at the present time. I can use traffic lights. Okay, if you are a traffic light user for volume in your classroom, perhaps. There's a timer and a stopwatch and a calendar, and at just one click, all of these things are here for you. So again, this is a whole lot of tools, super easy to access at the touch of a button on your screen for your entire classroom, and free. We like free. So the last area we're going to talk about here, and I know we're kind of wrapping up, is I want to talk a little bit about some things that are more for calming. So we've been talking about engagement things, some things for students who maybe are escalated or, displaying some behaviors. But what about students who need to find that internal calm? So these are our students who maybe are escalated, right? Have that emotional dysregulation. This is one of my favorite quotes. How do I calm down when I don't know what calm feels like? This can be really difficult for our students. So here's some tools and things that can help out. So I'm not going to have time to go through all of these, but I do have them here so you can explore them. Time Warp is a time management tool. It actually can monitor how long you're on different websites. So for students who are like, I was only on YouTube for 2 minutes, Time Warp can kind of give them a visual of how long were they really there. Momentum is one of my favorites for emotional regulation. I have Momentum installed on my computer right now. If I click on this, instead of the normal Google background, I'm going to get this. It's going to give me my name. It's going to give me an option for what my focus is. I can put my to-do list over here and I can have positive quotes. This is much more calming than seeing the Google homepage every time you open a new screen. So that one is Momentum. And then Move It is going to be a movement reminder. When you add the extension Move It, every time you set it, so you can set it for 5-minute, 10-minute, 15-minute intervals, when that time's up, you're going to get a big red screen that's going to tell you to move. And it's going to make a suggestion of what you do. So jumping jacks, jumping, knee raises. For iOS, there are a few tools. ChoiceWorks is one of my favorite. It is a paid app, but this allows you to provide visual stories and social stories to your students. What I do really like about it is it will provide some things for you, but it also gives you the option to record your own videos. So this can include things like when I'm upset, I can, and then videos of 2 different options. So you can easily give students those social stories and those visual cues without you necessarily needing to be in their space. Some other apps would be Pause. This is Mindful Moments. Can the recorded videos on ChoiceWorks be shared? Okay, so the question just came in chat. Can the recorded videos on ChoiceWorks be shared? So if you record a video and put it onto ChoiceWorks, you can put it onto multiple iPads if you'd like, right? Because the video is stored maybe on your Google Drive, or you put it on email. So you can add it to multiples. Once the video is in the app, students don't have a way to edit and pull it out. So they can't pull it out unless they have the editing password. So Mindful Moments, this is the Pause app. So that big dot that's in the middle just slowly moves around on your screen, and your job is to keep your finger on it. It moves very slowly. It's really a focusing thing. And the longer your finger's on the dot, the bigger the dot grows. So that's a really cool one for students. And then Breathing Zone is a deep breathing practice. It's going to really encourage students to breathe with the circle. So again, some deep breathing. Some things that are a little more entertaining, I guess, when it comes to calming. Mindful Powers, this is a free and a paid version. That little guy there is a fidgety gibbet. I can't quite pronounce it. But as you can see, he's kind of bumpy. When you rub your finger across him, he slowly smooths out and he purrs, and he's your friend, right? And he gets happy. But if you move your finger too fast, he gets all sad and he tells you that he's not feeling good. So again, for students that kind of like taking care of something, this one's really great. My Life, My Voice is a mood journal, online mood journal for some of your students. What I like is it gives those really expressive emojis to pay attention and kind of draw the students in. The last couple of slides here, I'm going to just allow you to watch the videos on this. There's a tool called the PIP. It is a little small biofeedback device students hold between their fingers, and it reads their emotional status by the electrical impulses in their fingers. So students can actually see a visual on an iPad of if they are escalating or de-escalating at the time. This is more expensive. It's about $90 to buy the PIP, which is one of the reasons I don't spend as much time on it. But if you have a self-regulation or SEL budget in your school and you're looking for something, I would recommend checking out the PIP. And then as always, some last minute engagement tools. if you have the opportunity to work with augmented reality, you have iPads. If you have the option again to do some purchasing, Osmo and Sphero are both really engaging things for students. Now, these don't directly go into emotions and behaviors, but again, we all know that when we have something really engaging, it can really catch in and pull some of those students who may not be as engaged in the learning process. So I always like to kind of throw these in here. Again, I do know that you've got a copy of this presentation before this webinar, so you can go back and check these out later as well. I'm going to end this with my email and my Twitter handle. If you have any questions about the things we've talked about today, or you try out QR codes and something's just not working real well for you, or you have questions about any of these, definitely feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to answer questions and get feedback and hear what you have to say. So you definitely can email me at that email. If you don't have any other questions in the chat, I think I've got through all of the questions that have been coming through, but I'm happy to stay here for a couple of minutes, but I do know that our time's up and time is super important. So I'm going to wrap up at this point.
All right, it looks like there are no questions. I just want to say thank you, Cassie, for such a wonderful presentation. For those of you still with us, you should receive an email tomorrow to access the certificate of attendance. Thank you for attending and have a great day.
Thank you.